you've felt it before. You're sitting in a coffee shop or standing in line at the grocery store, and you turn your head slightly because something doesn't feel right. And there it is, a baby, somewhere nearby, staring directly at you. Not glancing, not looking around the room, staring, locked in, unblinking, like they know something about you that you don't even know about yourself. And for a moment, something strange happens inside you. You feel seen. Not in the way adults see you, where there's always a filter, always a judgment, always a social script running underneath. This is different. This feels raw, almost uncomfortably honest. And you might laugh it off or make a silly face to break the tension, but somewhere deep down, a quiet question flickers through your mind. Why me? What are they looking at? That question is more important than you think, because what's happening in that moment isn't random, it isn't meaningless, and the psychology behind it reveals something fascinating, not just about how babies see the world, but about how all of us, even as adults, are still being seen in ways we don't consciously understand. Let's start with what's actually happening in that tiny, developing brain. When a baby stares at you, they're not being rude, they're not zoning out. They're doing something that most adults have completely forgotten how to do. They're reading you without a story. No assumptions, no past experience to project onto your face, no social categorization. They're processing you as pure sensory information. The geometry of your face, the movement of your eyes, the micro-expressions flickering across your mouth, the rhythm of your breathing, all of it. And they're doing it with an intensity that most adults would find socially unbearable. Here's why that matters. Babies are born with an almost disproportionate attraction to human faces. Research in developmental psychology has shown that within hours of birth, newborns preferentially track face-like patterns over every other visual stimulus. Not toys, not bright colors, faces. The human face is, neurologically speaking, the very first thing a baby's brain decides is worth paying attention to. And that preference isn't aesthetic, it's survival. A baby cannot feed itself, cannot move itself, cannot protect itself. Its entire existence depends on reading the emotional state of the people around it. So the brain, before it can form a single word or a single conscious thought, develops an incredibly sophisticated system for scanning faces, not for beauty, not for familiarity, at least not initially, but for safety, for emotional availability, for the answer to one deeply primal question: are you safe for me? That's what the stare is really about. It's not curiosity the way we typically think of curiosity, it's assessment. Emotional assessment. And the baby doesn't know it's doing it. There's no conscious strategy. It's pure pattern recognition operating beneath the surface of awareness in a brain that hasn't yet learned to mask, to perform, or to look away out of politeness. And this is where it starts to get interesting. Because the reason that stare can feel so intense, so weirdly penetrating, is that the baby is responding to something most adults have trained themselves to ignore. Your micro-expressions, the ones you don't even know you're making. The slight tension around your jaw when you're carrying stress. The softening around your eyes when you're genuinely calm. The almost invisible shift in your facial muscles when you're pretending to be fine but aren't. Adults have learned to filter these signals out. We override them constantly. Someone smiles and says they're okay, and we accept it, even when their face is telling a completely different story. But a baby hasn't learned that filter yet. A baby takes in the raw data, all of it, and responds to it honestly. So when a baby stares at you and then smiles, that's not nothing. That's a nervous system that has just scanned your emotional landscape and decided, without language, without logic, without any of the social masks that adults rely on, that something about your presence feels safe. And when a baby stares at you and then looks away or starts to cry, that's not nothing either. That's the same system reaching a different conclusion. Now, here's the layer that most people miss entirely. That scanning system, that primal face-reading mechanism that babies are born with, it doesn't go away. You still have it,
Every adult still has it. It just gets buried under social conditioning, under the learned habit of prioritizing words over feelings, under years of being taught that what people say matters more than what their face is doing while they say it. But the system is still running, underneath everything. And this is why you sometimes meet a person and feel instantly comfortable without knowing why, or feel subtly uneasy around someone who hasn't done or said anything wrong. That's not paranoia, that's not irrationality, that's your oldest, deepest perceptual system doing exactly what it was designed to do. The same thing it did when you were 5 months old and couldn't look away from a stranger's face. You're still reading people the way a baby reads people. You've just learned to doubt the results. And that's a significant psychological shift, because when you start doubting your own perception, something changes in how you move through the world. You begin over-relying on words, on explanations, on what people tell you about themselves, instead of what you feel in their presence. And slowly, very slowly, you lose trust in the one system that was designed from birth to keep you emotionally safe.
But the baby hasn't lost that trust yet. That's why the stare is so pure. That's why I can feel almost spiritual when a baby locks eyes with you across a room. You're not being looked at socially. You're being looked at truthfully, and on some level, you can feel the difference. There's another dimension to this that's worth sitting with. Babies don't just stare at faces randomly. Studies have shown that they tend to stare longer at faces that display high contrast features, at faces that are symmetrical, and at faces that are expressive. But beyond the physical, there's a behavioral component that researchers have started paying closer attention to. Babies stare longer at people who are emotionally present, not performing, not distracted, present. If you're sitting in a room scrolling through your phone, a baby nearby may glance at you and move on. But if you're sitting quietly, your face open, your attention unhurried, available, something about that state draws the baby's gaze and holds it. And this reveals something quietly profound about human attention. We're wired from our very first days of life to detect presence, real presence, not eye contact as a social technique, not active listening as a communication strategy, but genuine, unguarded emotional availability. Babies can feel it. And honestly, so can adults. We've just stopped admitting it. Think about the people in your life who feel calming to be around, not because they say the right things or give great advice, but because something in their presence feels settled, unhurried, warm without trying to be. What you're responding to in those people is the same thing a baby responds to when it stares and then softens. You're recognizing nervous system safety, and your body knew it before your mind caught up. So the next time a baby stares at you, consider what's actually happening. A brand new human being with no social agenda, no personal bias, no reason to flatter you or perform for you, has looked at you and decided you're worth paying attention to. Their brain, running on millions of years of evolutionary wiring, has scanned your face, your energy, your presence, and something in you registered. That's not a cute moment. That's one of the most honest forms of human feedback you will ever receive. And here's the part that tends to stay with people long after they hear it. The discomfort you sometimes feel when a baby stares at you, that subtle urge to look away, to make a face, to break the tension with a performance, that discomfort isn't about the baby. It's about being seen without your usual armor. No social role, no curated identity, no words to shape the narrative. Just your face, just your energy, just whatever you're carrying in that moment, visible to a pair of eyes that doesn't know how to pretend it isn't there. Most adults spend enormous energy managing how they're perceived, and then a 7-month-old looks at them from across a restaurant and all of that management becomes irrelevant. The baby doesn't see your job title, doesn't see your social media presence, doesn't see the version of yourself you've spent years constructing. The baby sees what's underneath. And that can feel strangely exposing, even if you can't quite explain why. That reaction, that flicker of vulnerability, tells you something worth knowing. Not about the baby, about yourself, about how much of your daily life is spent curating perception, and how rare it is to be in the presence of someone who bypasses all of it without even trying. A baby's stare isn't just a developmental behavior, it's a mirror. one that reflects you without the filters you've grown so accustomed to that you've forgotten they're even there. And once you see it that way, you don't really look at that moment the same again. It was never just a baby staring. It was the most honest eye contact you've had all week. And that awareness, just that small shift in understanding, changes something quietly. Not in what you do, but in what you notice, in what you let yourself feel, in how you recognize the difference between being looked at and being truly seen. It was never random. It was recognition at the most fundamental human level. If this explains something you've quietly felt but never had words for, there's more to uncover here. Understanding how you're wired is the beginning of understanding everything else.